She buried a child and spent 10 years running from the memory. He buried his wife in the kitchen and hadn't let anyone touch the stove since. Two broken people, one failing ranch, and one impossible meal that neither of them was ready for. This isn't just a love story. It's the story of what happens when two people who have lost everything finally stop protecting themselves long enough to let something real grow in all that empty space. This channel carries the stories that stay with you long after the last word, tales of the Old West where love is hard won, where a mother's grief runs bone deep, where cowboys show their hearts one quiet act at a time, and where human compassion turns strangers into family. What this story teaches us: grief is not the end of your story. It is sometimes the very door that leads you to the life you were always meant to live, if you're brave enough to walk through it. If this moved something in you, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell me, are you someone who runs or someone who stays? I'd love to know. Your story matters here too.
Clara had certainly seen worse kitchens in her day, but not many. The ranch house kitchen smelled of pure surrender. Stale coffee, spoiled lard, and a strange scent she recognized as the smell of men who had long since stopped hoping for anything better. A crust of old flour covered nearly every surface. The stove looked as if it had not been properly cleaned since the war began. Rusted hooks held pots with handles that were eaten through with corrosion. She placed her small travel bag on the one clean patch of floor she could find and immediately pushed up her sleeves. A voice spoke from the doorway. "Ma'am, if I were you, I would not even touch that sink." It belonged to a young cowboy leaning against the doorframe, who could not have been more than 20 years old, with eyes that had seen too much sun and not enough kindness. Both elbows of his shirt were covered with patches. "What is your name, son?" Clara asked, her eyes still fixed on the counter she was furiously scrubbing. "Tommy Birch, ma'am." "Well, Tommy Birch, you can either pitch in and help me, or you can get out of my way." He stayed put. "The boss told me you have 3 hours. The fellas are already making jokes." She said, "Let them joke." Clara located a bucket, worked the pump handle, and began to haul in water. "I have been the butt of jokes before." Tommy adjusted his stance. "Do you honestly believe you can whip up something in this pigsty that will convince Ethan Calloway to let you stay?" She finally turned and looked right at him. "I am not trying to get him to let me stay. I am trying to settle up what I owe." "For what?" he asked. "For pulling you out from under that wagon?" She answered, "For remembering that I was a person worth pulling out." That quieted him down for a good long while. Clara had made it to Red Hollow Ranch about 3 hours after noon, having tracked the quiet cowboy who had rescued her near Wichita Falls. A sudden dust storm had descended, turning the bright day into a dark night. She had been riding on a merchant wagon that was not heading anywhere special when the wind struck like a punch from the heavens. The wagon flipped over, and the driver took off running. She was trapped underneath a wheel, swallowing mouthfuls of dirt, when a pair of strong hands lifted the heavy weight off of her. By the time she could catch her breath, the man was already on his horse and riding away. The merchant later explained that was Ethan Calloway, was Ethan. He owns the Red Hollow Ranch about 40 miles north of here. He lost his wife about 3 years ago. He is not much of a talker, and he never sticks around to be thanked. Clara had then spent a whole week asking about him in every little town between Wichita Falls and the Red River. Everyone told her the same thing. Calloway was a tough man, but he was always fair. His ranch was not doing well. No cook ever stayed for more than a week. The entire place seemed to have a dark cloud hanging over it, almost like a curse. But she was not concerned with curses. She was concerned with her debts. When she finally arrived at the ranch house, covered in mud and completely worn out, Ethan was mending a fence post. He looked at her, trying to place where he might have seen her before. "You pulled me out from under a wagon," she said. It was 5 nights ago, during that bad storm outside of Wichita Falls. He struck the post with his hammer 2 more times. So that was you. I came to pay you back for it. I do not need to be paid back, but I need to pay you. It was then that he finally looked at her, really looked at her. His eyes were the color of the sky on a cold winter day just before it snows. They were hard and far away. Do you have any money? No. Then you do not have anything I want. Clara pulled her shoulders back. I know how to cook. Just let me make one meal for you tonight. If your men do not like it, I will be gone before the sun comes up. But I always settle my debts, Mr. Calloway, one way or another. He watched her for a long, silent moment, and she saw just a flicker of something in his eyes. It was not quite hope, but maybe it was curiosity about what kind of fool woman would travel for 5 days just to make supper for a bunch of strangers. 3 hours, he said at last. Supper is at 6. If the boys turn their noses up at it, you are gone. And now she was standing in his disaster of a kitchen, while Tommy Birch stared at her as if she had just grown a pair of wings. Are you really going to try and cook in here? Tommy asked. First, I am going to clean, then I'm going to cook. Are you planning to help me out, or are you just going to stand there and pass judgment? He pushed himself away from the door frame. What do you need? Hot water, a whole lot of it. And go find me the oldest man on this ranch. I need someone who can remember what used to be stocked in this kitchen before it all went downhill. A grin spread across Tommy's face. That would be Charlie Moss. He has been working here since before Ethan's father passed away. Go get him. As Tommy ran off to find the old man, Clara surveyed her battleground. She had 3 hours to work a miracle using ingredients she had not even located yet, with tools that looked like they could give her a nasty infection. Most other women would have turned around and walked right out. But Clara Whitmore had not walked out on many things in her 31 years. And she was not about to start now. She went to work on the stove first, scraping away years of caked-on grease and dumping it into a bucket. Her hands began to sting, but she kept on working. Charlie Moss showed up, smelling of horses and chewing tobacco, and squinted at her as if she were a ghost. Tommy tells me you are looking for the old inventory, he said, his voice sounding like gravel rattling around in a tin can. I need to know what you have here, what is still good to eat, and what has been forgotten. Charlie stroked his long beard. Well, now, there are some dried peaches up in the attic. Mrs. Calloway, the first Mrs. Calloway, that is, Ethan's mother, used to store them up there. They are probably still fine if the mice have not gotten to them. What else? The root cellar should have some potatoes, carrots, and onions, provided they have not all gone to rot. The smokehouse has a few beef bones. The boys these days do not care much for bones, they just want the meat. The flour bin is fresh, though. We just got a new supply last week. There is buttermilk in the icebox, but it has likely gone sour by now. Clara paused to wipe the sweat from her brow. That buttermilk had better not be sour. I need it. Charlie's eyes got narrow. Are you planning on making fried chicken? Only if I can get this stove hot enough to cook with and find some oil that has not gone bad. The old cowboy's expression suddenly softened. We have not had any decent fried chicken around here since his voice trailed off. Since when? Since Ethan's wife passed away. She used to cook it for us every Sunday. The whole ranch would smell like a piece of heaven. Clara looked him straight in the eye. Well then, let's make this place smell like heaven one more time. Charlie disappeared and returned with another ranch hand, a younger Mexican man with gentle hands and cautious eyes. This here is Miguel. He is the best man we have with a fire. He will make sure your stove stays burning just right. Miguel gave a single nod. Senora. Call me Clara. Just Clara. Before long, the kitchen was a hive of activity. Miguel managed to get the old stove roaring back to life. Tommy hauled in buckets of water until his shirt was completely soaked. Charlie came down from the attic carrying 2 jars of dried peaches, which were dusty but still sealed tight. Another cowboy, who did not bother to introduce himself, brought up a load of vegetables from the root cellar. Clara worked like a woman on a mission. She checked the buttermilk. It was still good. She set it aside with some cracked black pepper and salt to make a brine for the chicken. She sifted through the flour, found some cornmeal, and began to prepare the batter for some skillet cornbread. She sent Tommy out to the smokehouse to gather up every last beef bone he could find. And do not bother coming back unless you have at least a dozen of them. Are we trying to feed a whole army? Tommy shouted back. No, we are going to feed some hungry men. There is a big difference. As the bones roasted in the oven to draw out their rich flavor, Clara chopped up potatoes and carrots with a knife she had to sharpen herself. The steel blade sang as it moved against the whetstone. Her hands moved with a familiar rhythm, remembering the motions from countless other kitchens and countless other lives she had lived before this one. She did not bother to tell these cowboys that she had cooked in logging camps and mining towns, or that she had fed railroad crews and ranch hands from Montana all the way down to Mexico. She did not tell them that food was the only language she had ever been able to speak with any real fluency. You did not have to share your whole life story with men like these. All you had to do was feed them. The chicken pieces went into the buttermilk brine to soak. She then coated each piece in a seasoned flour mixture of black pepper, salt, and just a tiny hint of cayenne pepper. The fat in the big skillet sizzled and popped when she dropped in the first piece, and a delicious smell began to fill the kitchen like a long-awaited promise. Charlie paused in the doorway and took a deep breath. Lord Almighty, he whispered in awe. Miguel quickly made the sign of the cross. Tommy just stood there, completely mesmerized. It smells like... I do not even know what that smells like. It smells like someone actually gives a damn, Clara said, as she turned the chicken over with a pair of tongs she had discovered under a pile of old rags. Now, all of you get out of my kitchen before you drip sweat into my dinner. They all scurried away. She finished her work alone, which was how she always preferred it. The cornbread batter was poured into a heavy cast iron skillet, and it began to bubble up around the edges where it touched the hot pan. The beef bones simmered away in a pot large enough to bathe the small child, slowly releasing all of their savory goodness. She added onions, carrots, potatoes, salt, and pepper, along with a single bay leaf she had found in a long-forgotten jar. The peach cobbler was the very last thing she made. She soaked the dried fruit in hot water until it became plump and soft, then mixed it with sugar, cinnamon, and butter. She rolled out a biscuit dough for the topping, her hands moving automatically, guided by muscle memory. The sun was beginning to set when the kitchen door swung open. Ethan Calloway was standing there, and just behind him, she could see all 16 of his men gathering like a jury ready to deliver a verdict. He looked all around the kitchen. The kitchen was brand new, with spotless counters and shelves in perfect order, and pots that were bubbling with a sense of purpose. His face didn't give anything away, but I could see a flicker in his eyes. He said, "You had 3 hours." And I told him, "I used every minute. The boys are hungry. Well then, let's get them fed." Clara had prepared the long table in the ranch dining hall. She had found and washed the plates, polished the forks, and scrubbed the cups. There were no fancy centerpieces, no flowers, just clean plates and food that smelled like it came from home. The cowboys came in one by one, quiet and full of suspicion. They sat down like men who were half expecting their food to be poisoned. Clara brought out the chicken first, golden brown and crispy, still sizzling from the pan. Next came the cornbread, with honey she had found in the pantry dripping down its sides. The beef stew was in a bowl big enough to feed a whole army, and the peach cobbler was sitting on the sideboard just waiting. Not a soul said a word. Nobody even budged. Ethan Calloway sat at the head of the table, his expression impossible to read. He looked at that chicken like he thought it might just bite him back. He looked at Clara like she had just performed some kind of black magic. "Well," she said, "it is not going to eat itself." It was Charlie Moss who reached for the chicken first, his hand shaking just a little. He picked up a piece, took a bite, and then he just closed his eyes. "Sweet Lord," was all he managed to whisper. And that was all it took. 16 men fell upon that food like they had not seen a decent meal in their lives. The chicken was gone in a flash. The cornbread vanished in huge bites. The stew disappeared so quickly Clara barely had a moment to bring the refill from the kitchen. All this time, Ethan had not even touched his plate. Clara walked right up and stood next to him. You said if the men do not like it, I would have to leave. Well, he finally picked up his fork and cut into a piece of chicken. The crispy skin just cracked under the fork. The meat on the inside was perfectly white and tender with steam rising from it. He took one bite. The whole room fell silent again, just waiting. Ethan chewed his food slowly, swallowed, and put his fork down. Then he picked it right back up and took another bite. "Eat," he said to the men, his voice all rough like gravel. And for the first time in 3 long years, Red Hollow Ranch heard a sound it had forgotten even existed. Laughter. Tommy told a joke about a horse. Miguel started arguing with Charlie about the right way to fix a fence. Another cowboy, whose name Clara learned was Pete, asked for a second helping and then a third. When the cobbler was served, grown men were fighting over the last spoonful like a bunch of kids. Clara just stood in the kitchen doorway and watched it all happen. This was the real reason she cooked. It was not about the food itself, but for this exact moment, the moment when folks remember they are more than just hungry bellies to fill. It is when a table turns into a place for gathering instead of just a feeding trough. When a house finally starts to feel like a home once more. Ethan found her standing there after the men had all gone, their stomachs full and their spirits high. "You can stay," was all he said. Clara just shook her head. "I said 1 meal. I said I would pay back my debt, and now it is paid. I will be leaving in the morning." He took a step closer, and she could smell the scent of horses and leather on him, and something else, too. It was a sadness that had sunk deep into his skin like some old, forgotten cologne. "What if I offered you a job?" "I am not looking for any work." "What are you looking for, then?" She looked him right in the eye. Those eyes of his were like a winter sky, holding far too much sorrow and not nearly enough hope. "I am just looking for the next place that needs me. That is all I have ever looked for. This place needs you. For how long? A week? Maybe 2? I have seen this all before, Mr. Calloway. Men get all worked up about good food, and then they get real comfortable, and then they start making demands, and then they just get mean. I have been run off of more ranches than you have got cattle. Not this one. You do not know that. I know those men have not laughed like that in 3 years. I know Charlie Moss just told me flat out he would quit if you left. I know 16 tough ranch hands just finished a peach cobbler and asked for the recipe like they were planning on writing home to their mothers about it. He took a breath. And I know I just tasted something that reminded me I am still alive. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. That is just food. It is not some kind of magic. Maybe not, he said, but it is something. And something is a whole lot more than we have had around here for a long time. She wanted to argue with him. She wanted to tell him that she had heard all these promises before from ranch owners and camp bosses and wagon masters who all swore she was essential, right up until the very moment they decided she was not. But there was something in Ethan Calloway's face that made her stop. It was not desperation, and it was not him trying to trick her. It was just a simple, honest need. 1 week she heard herself say, "I will stay for 1 week. If things work out, we will talk. If they do not, I am gone. And you will not owe me a single thing. Deal." They shook hands on it. His was calloused and strong, and hers was dusted with flour and marked with scars from a lifetime of kitchen burns. Neither of them knew it at that moment, but that handshake was the start of something that neither of them was prepared for. It was something that would challenge them both in ways that good food just could not fix. It was something that was already stirring in the darkness just outside the ranch house, just waiting for the perfect time to make its move. But for right then, in that moment, with the smell of fried chicken still lingering in the air and the sound of happy men drifting in through the walls, Clara Whitmore let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place that would not just cast her aside, even if it was just for a week, even if she was only fooling herself, and even if the real challenge was still on its way. The rooster had not even thought about crowing when Clara heard the sound of boots on the porch. She had been up since 4 o'clock, getting the kitchen fire going, measuring out the coffee, and trying to remember if she had ever been this nervous about making breakfast. Through the window, she could see shadows moving around in the bunkhouse. The men were starting to stir, getting ready for a day of work that began long before the sun had any right to be up. The door opened without so much as a knock. Ethan was standing there, holding his hat in his hand and looking like he had not slept a wink. "I did not expect you to be up this early. A ranch does not feed itself. Neither do you." He placed something down on the counter. It was a tin of real coffee, the expensive kind that comes all the way from New Orleans. "I thought you might be in need of this." Clara just stared at the tin. Where did this come from? "I had it put away for a special occasion. It seemed like today was the day for it." "Are you hiding anything else I should know about?" "Plenty. But the coffee is a start." He turned like he was about to leave, and then he stopped. "The men are going to be expecting the same kind of food you gave them yesterday. I just thought you should know." "I cannot be frying chicken every single morning, Mr. Calloway. It is Ethan, and I am not asking you to. I am just giving you a fair warning. You have set a standard." He was gone before she could even answer. Clara opened the tin and took a deep breath of the rich smell of real coffee, not that burnt chicory stuff that most ranches served. Her hands were shaking just a bit as she measured it out. 1 meal down, 20 more to go before the week was over. No pressure at all. By the time the sun finally started to peek over the horizon, she had biscuits baking in the oven, bacon sizzling in the pan, eggs scrambled with some cheese she had found wrapped in a cloth in the icebox, gravy bubbling away on the stove, and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. The cowboys came in groups. First came the early risers, then the ones who liked to sleep in, and then Charlie Moss, who was moving slower than molasses in winter, but he had a grin on his face as wide as Christmas morning. "It smells just like my mama's kitchen in here," he announced to nobody in particular. Tommy Birch gave him a nudge with his elbow. "Your mama could not cook worth a darn, and you know it. She could in my memory, and that is what matters." They filled up the dining room, and they were a lot louder than they had been the day before. They seemed more comfortable with each other. Clara brought out the platters of food and watched them dig in with the kind of intense focus that men only have for things they are worried might disappear. Miguel caught her eye and gave her a single nod. "Muy bueno, señora. Save the compliments until after you have tasted it." "I do not need to taste it. I can tell by the way Charlie's eyes got all watery." "They did not," Charlie shot back through a mouthful of biscuit. "They did too. I saw you wipe your face. That was just grease. You are a lying Mexican. Both of you just shut up and eat," Pete yelled from down at the end of the table. Clara slipped back into the kitchen. Her heart was pounding a lot harder than it should have been. 2 meals. That is all she had served them. Just 2 meals. And these men were already acting like she had been there for years instead of just a few hours. It should have felt good. But instead, it felt dangerous. She had learned the hard way that the higher men lift you up, the harder they let you fall when you finally let them down. And sooner or later, she always let them down. The breakfast plates all came back to the kitchen, scraped completely clean. Tommy stayed behind while she was washing the dishes. "Do you need any help? You've got cattle to look after, do you not?" "Yeah, but then you should go look after them." "I have got this." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, holding his hat in his hands. "Some of the boys have started placing bets." Clara's hands stopped moving in the soapy water. "On what?" "On how long you are going to last. Most of them are saying a week, maybe 2. A few of them think you will be gone by Friday." He took a pause. "I bet that you would stay. You should not bet money that you cannot afford to lose." Tommy was not betting with money. "I bet my Sunday off next month." "That is a stupid bet." "Maybe so, but I think you are a lot tougher than how you look." He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "And keep an eye on Frank Delaney. He is the big fella with the scar on his cheek. He has been here the longest, right after Charlie, and he is not a man who takes kindly to change." I made a mental note. After Tommy left, Clara was left standing in the kitchen by herself with soap suds dripping from her hands. Frank Delaney. She remembered seeing him at breakfast. He sat away from the other men, ate his food without a word, and watched her like a coyote sizing up a hen house. He was a big man, maybe 40 years old, with a look in his eyes that suggested an anger just waiting for an excuse to boil over. She had run into men like Frank before. They were always the source of trouble. By noon, Clara had scrubbed the kitchen clean from top to bottom a second time, taken a proper inventory of the pantry, and found out that Red Hollow Ranch was just 3 weeks from being out of flour. They had no sugar at all, and they were down to their last jar of canned vegetables, put up by someone 2 summers back. She located Ethan in the barn, putting a new shoe on a horse. "We are in need of supplies," she stated, getting straight to the point. He did not even bother to look up. "Town is 20 miles to the south. We make a supply run every 2 weeks. We just went last week." "Well, then you must have gone to the wrong stores. Or you did not purchase enough, or someone around here has been stealing." That finally made him look up. "Nobody steals from this ranch. Then you tell me how you're nearly out of basic provisions with 16 men to feed." Ethan carefully put down the horse's hoof and stood up straight, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We get by with what we have. You cannot get by with empty flour sacks, Ethan. I will take care of it." "When is that going to be?" "Because dinner is in 6 hours and I am already having to ration what little we have. I said I will handle it." Clara took a step closer, getting near enough to smell the horse, the hot metal, and the frustration rolling off of him. "You hired me to come here and cook. I cannot make a meal out of thin air. You either give me a budget to buy supplies or you admit this whole ranch is broke." The silence hung between them, as tense as a strand of barbed wire. "We are not broke," Ethan said at last. "We are running lean. There is a difference." "Exactly how lean?" "Lean enough that I cannot spare any hands for a trip to town for supplies until Saturday. That is 4 days away. I know how to count, thank you. And do you know how to feed 16 hungry men with nothing but hope and old coffee grounds?" Ethan clenched his jaw. "You told me you would stay for a week. I reckon we will see if you are a woman of your word." He turned his back on her and went back to the horse. Clara felt a strong urge to argue, to tell him she was not a miracle worker, that cooking needed actual ingredients, and that his stubborn pride was about to let his men go hungry. But instead, she turned and walked back to the kitchen to figure out a plan. Dinner that evening was beef bone soup once more, served with the very last of the good bread. The men ate it and did not complain, but she could sense their disappointment hanging in the air like the heavy humidity right before a thunderstorm. It was Frank Delaney who finally spoke up. "This is the same soup we had last night." Clara looked him straight in the eye. "Same bones, but different vegetables. Is there a problem? It just seems to me that a cook who boasts about paying her debts would offer a little more variety." "A cook who has supplies offers variety. A cook who is working with nothing but scraps has to make do. Maybe you are not as skilled as you claim to be." A hush fell over the entire table. Charlie Moss cleared his throat nervously. "Frank, that is quite enough." "Is it, though? We all got our hopes up for fried chicken and maybe some cobbler. Instead, we are eating bone soup as if we are as poor as church mice." Frank shoved his bowl away from him. "I have eaten better food on cattle drives." "Then perhaps you ought to go join one," Clara replied, her voice dangerously quiet. "Maybe I ought to. Maybe we all ought to before we all starve to death, waiting around for miracles that are not going to happen." Ethan's voice sliced through the tension like a sharp knife. "If you have something you want to say to me, Frank, then say it directly. Do not take your frustrations out on the cook." Frank stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am just saying what every man here is thinking, boss. You brought in some woman to try and fix problems that cannot be fixed with a good meal. This ranch is dying. It has been dying ever since Mrs. Calloway passed away. Bringing in strays is not going to change that fact. Sit down. I am done sitting." Frank stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard it made the windows rattle in their frames. No one moved a muscle. No one said a word. Clara could feel her face turning red with shame. "I will be gone in the morning." "You will do no such thing," Ethan commanded. "He is right. I cannot fix this with food. He is angry. Angry men have a habit of saying foolish things." Ethan looked at the faces around the table. Does anyone else want to leave? The door is open, but Clara is staying for the week we agreed on. After that, it is her decision. One after another, the men slowly returned to their meal. But the harm had been done. Clara went back into the kitchen and held onto the counter, trying to fight back the tears that she refused to let anyone see. This was the reason she never settled down. This was the reason she always kept moving on. Because in the end, they always turned on you. They always blamed you for the problems that were there long before you ever showed up. He's just scared. She turned around and saw Miguel standing in the doorway. Frank, he went on, he is scared that this ranch is going under. He is scared he is going to lose the only home he has had for 15 years. He is scared that if we cannot afford to buy food, then we cannot afford to keep him on. That does not give him the right to act that way. No. But being scared can make a man mean, you know that. And Clara did know that. She had witnessed it in dusty mining camps and remote logging towns, in kitchens all the way from here to Montana. Fear and hunger had a way of making men cruel. I do not have enough food to get us to Saturday, she admitted in a quiet voice. Then we will make what we have last. How? Miguel gave a small smile. You are not the only one who knows how to stretch a meal, senora. My abuela could feed 12 people with just 3 potatoes and a prayer. I will show you how. For the next 3 hours, Miguel showed Clara the old ways his grandmother had used back in Sonora. He taught her how to render every last bit of fat, how to soak dried beans overnight so they would double in size, how to make the flour last longer by mixing it with cornmeal, and how to turn vegetable peels and ends into a flavorful stock. They worked side by side in a comfortable quiet, and Clara felt a small change happening inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she was not completely alone in this fight after all. Breakfast on Thursday was a simple cornmeal mush sweetened with the last drops of their honey. The men ate every bit without a word of complaint. Lunch was a bean soup so thick you could stand a spoon up in it. Dinner was a potato hash with pieces of bacon so tiny they were more of a memory than actual meat. With every meal she served, Clara braced herself for a revolt. But instead, the men just ate. And on Friday morning, when she served them fried mush with a little sorghum syrup that Tommy had discovered in the back of the pantry, Charlie Moss began to tell a story about his mother making the very same dish during the war. We ate that every single day for 2 months straight, he said. I thought I would never be able to look at it again. But this, he took another bite, this tastes like she is right here with me. Frank Delaney never came to any of the meals. Clara did not bother to ask where he was. On Friday night, Ethan came into the kitchen after all the other men had turned in for the night. We are making a supply run tomorrow morning, he told her. I am taking the wagon into town. I will need a list from you. Clara handed him 3 pages of items she had carefully written out, complete with quantities and what she estimated the cost would be. He just stared at the pages. This is very detailed. That is my job. Most cooks just shout out what they need. I am not most cooks. He folded the papers and slid them into his pocket. Frank owes you an apology. Frank does not owe me a thing. He was right. I cannot fix this ranch with food. But you fed us anyway. You fed us on practically nothing for 5 days. Ethan leaned up against the counter. Do you have any idea what that takes? Desperation, a lot of skill, and something more. He paused for a moment. My wife always used to say that cooking was the only honest work left in this world. You could not fake it. You could not pretend. The food either nourished you or it did not. Clara felt a lump forming in her throat. She sounds like she was a very smart woman. She was smart enough to marry me when I had absolutely nothing but this ranch and a big dream. He glanced around the kitchen. She passed away in this very room. A fever took her in just 3 days. I was powerless to save her. I could not do a single thing but stand by and watch her fade away. I am so sorry. Do not be. Just try to understand why this kitchen sat empty for all that time. Why I just let it fall apart. Because every single time I walked through that door, I had to watch her die all over again. He looked directly into Clara's eyes. Until you came here. Now when I walk in, I smell food cooking. I can hear people eating. It feels like maybe this place is not just a tomb that I'm trying to maintain. Clara had no idea what to say to that. Ethan pushed himself off the counter. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow we are going to start fresh. He walked out, leaving Clara standing alone in the kitchen that had once belonged to a woman who had died, feeling the heavy weight of expectations she had never wanted. She had promised herself she would stay for 1 week. That week was almost up, and she had no earthly idea what was going to happen next. Saturday morning dawned cold and sharp. The kind of chill in the air that warned you bad weather was on its way. Ethan hitched up the wagon before the sun was even up, and Clara watched him from the kitchen window as he loaded it with empty sacks and a few cash boxes. Tommy came up beside her quietly. The boss is taking Frank along with him. Why? Because Frank needs to see for himself just how bad things have gotten, how much we are having to spend just to stay afloat. Tommy's voice got lower. This ranch is in trouble, Clara. Real deep trouble. Ethan will not admit it, but all of us know this could very well be our last season if things do not get better soon. A cold knot formed in Clara's stomach. The last season? Cattle prices are way down. The cost of feed is sky high. We lost nearly half the herd last winter during that terrible cold snap. The bank is circling. And Ethan. Tommy's voice trailed off. What about Ethan? He is too proud to ever ask for help. He is too stubborn to sell the ranch. And he is too loyal to let any of us go, even when he cannot rightly afford to keep us. Tommy looked at her. Your staying here might be the only good thing that has happened to this place in 3 years. Do not waste it. He was gone before she could even think of a reply. Clara spent the morning getting ready for their return. She cleaned, she organized, and she planned out meals that would make the new supplies last as long as they possibly could. She had her hands buried deep in sourdough starter when Charlie Moss came bursting through the door. There is a storm coming, he said, struggling to catch his breath. A big one. The radio says it is going to hit us by nightfall, but it is only October. You can tell that to the sky. Clara looked out the kitchen window. The horizon had turned into a dark, bruised line. Angry purple and black clouds were rolling in fast, like an army on the march. Where is Ethan? Still in town. He should be back by 3. Charlie looked down at his pocket watch. It is noon right now. If that storm hits us early, he did not finish his sentence. He did not have to. By 2 o'clock, the temperature had dropped a full 20 degrees. By 2:30, the first snowflake began to fall. They were big, wet, heavy flakes, the kind that meant business. The cowboys all gathered together in the dining room, just watching the windows and watching the road. 3 o'clock came, and then it went. Still no wagon. 3:30. Miguel made the sign of the cross and started whispering prayers in Spanish. 4 o'clock. The snow was coming down so hard now that Clara could not even see the barn from the house. They should have been back by now, Pete said, saying what every man in the room was thinking. The road might be slow, Charlie suggested, but his voice did not sound very confident. 4:30. Tommy stood up. I am riding out. You will freeze to death out there, Clara heard herself say. It is better than just sitting here while the boss dies. Nobody is dying, she said, but her hands were shaking. Not if I can do anything about it. She went over to the stove and immediately started to work, heating up broth, wrapping bread in cloth, and filling thermoses with coffee that was hot enough to burn right through leather. Her hands knew exactly what to do, even while her mind was screaming in panic. What in the world are you doing? Miguel asked. I am making sure they have something warm when they get here. Clara's voice was firm. Not if they get here, but when. At 5 o'clock, as darkness settled in and the storm howled like a living creature, they heard it. The sound of wagon wheels, the panicked screams of horses, and the shouts of men sent everyone scrambling to the door. The wagon slid sideways into the yard, one wheel shattered, and supplies tumbled out into the deep snow. Ethan was on the driver's bench, his beard crusted with ice, his hands frozen fast to the reins. Frank Delaney was hanging off the side, his face covered in blood, one arm dangling at a terrible angle. Tommy and Miguel bolted out into the storm. Clara snatched the thermos and ran right behind them. The cold was like a punch to the gut that stole her breath, but she fought through it. She reached the wagon and pushed the thermos into Ethan's hands. Drink, she ordered. Frank, I see him. You drink first, then you can help. Ethan's hands were so numb he could not open the thermos. Clara twisted it open for him and held it to his lips. He drank, coughed, and then drank some more. The wheel broke about 5 miles back, he said, his teeth chattering. Frank jumped down to see if he could fix it. A horse got spooked and kicked him. His arm is broken, maybe some ribs, too. They managed to get Frank inside and settled both men near the fire. Clara moved on instinct, getting hot water and clean cloths. Miguel held Frank steady while she set the arm, using torn strips from a bedsheet since they had no proper splints. Frank cried out once, a sharp sound, and then he passed out. Good, Clara muttered to herself. This will be easier. She wrapped his ribs tightly, cleaned the gash on his head, and made sure his breathing was steady. Only then did she turn to Ethan, who was huddled by the fire, trying to keep from shaking to pieces. Take off your coat. I am fine. You are suffering from the cold. Take that coat off, or I will cut it off of you. He was too frozen to put up a fight. She stripped him down to his undershirt, wrapped him in heavy blankets, and made him drink more hot coffee. His lips had a bluish tint. His hands would not stop trembling. The supplies, he mumbled. Is he? To heck with the supplies. You nearly died out there. We got most of it. The cowboys had already started hauling the sacks inside. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, beans, rice, dried meat, and lard. Everything that was on her list and then some. Clara felt hot tears sting her eyes. He had nearly died just bringing her groceries. You are a complete fool, she whispered. Yeah, Ethan agreed, his teeth still chattering away. But you got all your supplies. It was in that moment she understood this was not just a job for him. This was not just about paying back a debt. This was something else entirely. It was something that scared her more than any storm ever could. The storm raged on for 3 whole days. Clara slept sitting up in a chair by the fire, keeping watch over Frank Delaney's breathing and Ethan Calloway's shivering under a pile of blankets that never seemed to get him warm enough. She had sent the other hands to the bunkhouse with strict orders to stay inside and stay warm. But she could not bring herself to leave these two. She would not leave them. By the second morning, Frank's fever had shot up. It is probably the ribs, Miguel said as he checked the bandages. It might be an infection setting in, or it could just be his body fighting the injury, Clara reasoned, pressing a cool, damp cloth to Frank's forehead. Either way, we just need to keep him comfortable and watch him very closely. You should get some sleep, Senora. I will sleep when they are both out of danger. Miguel left, and Clara was alone with 2 barely conscious men in a blizzard that showed no signs of letting up. She kept water boiling and changed bandages, and she carefully spooned broth between Frank's lips whenever he was awake enough to swallow. Ethan would wake up from time to time, confused and talking about cattle and fences and things that did not matter until he could stand on his own 2 feet. Shh, Clara would soothe him, gently pressing him back down. Just rest. Can't rest. There is work to do. The work can wait. You cannot. On the 3rd day, Frank woke up with clear eyes, fully aware. You are still here, he said, his voice as rough as gravel. Where else would I be? I figured I had run you off for good. Clara dipped a cloth in cool water and wrung it out. You certainly tried. I was wrong. He winced as he tried to shift his body. I said some terrible things. You did not deserve any of that. No, I did not. Are you going to make me beg for your forgiveness? I am going to make you heal up so you can get back to your job. This ranch needs you. Frank's eyes started to water. It has been a long time since anybody said that to me. Then the people around here are fools. Clara straightened his blankets. You have been on this ranch for 15 years. Charlie says that kind of loyalty is important. Loyalty does not pay the bills. No, but it builds something that money cannot buy. Frank looked closely at her face. Are you really going to stay? The week is already over. I suppose I missed my chance to leave. Good. He closed his eyes again. Because I think you might just be the one thing that saves us all. I am just a cook, Frank. You keep telling yourself that. When Ethan finally woke up all the way with no fever and no confusion, Just clear-eyed and himself again, he saw Clara asleep in the chair. Her head was tilted at an angle that he knew would cause her pain when she woke up. He stood up slowly, testing his legs, and carefully draped his own blanket over her shoulders. She did not move a muscle. He just stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, and felt something in his chest crack wide open that had been sealed up tight for 3 long years. This woman had saved his life. Even more than that, she had brought his ranch back from the brink of ruin with nothing more than flour and a whole lot of stubbornness. He had no idea what to do with that feeling. He did not know what to do with the urge his hands had to touch her hair, or the way his heart started beating faster whenever she smiled, or how he had started listening for the sound of her voice in the kitchen. "You're staring," Clara said, though her eyes were still shut. "Didn't mean to wake you," Ethan answered quietly. "You did not. Your thoughts did. They are mighty loud." "I did not realize thinking made noise." She opened her eyes then and gave him a good long look. It was the same look from that first night in the kitchen, when she told him she was going to cook. "You are on your feet. Reckon I am. How are you feeling?" "Like I was kicked by every horse in the stable and then left for dead in a norther." He took a breath. "But I am alive. Thanks to you. Thanks to hot coffee and wool blankets. Thanks to you for refusing to let me go." Ethan stepped closer. "Why did you do it? You could have stayed warm inside. You could have let the menfolk handle it, because men do not always handle things the right way." Clara pushed herself up, wincing as her neck complained. "And because, as I have told you, I pay my debts. You paid that debt 5 meals ago. Then maybe I am sticking around for a different reason." "What reason is that?" Clara met his gaze. "I have not quite figured that one out yet. The blizzard finally broke on its 4th day, leaving the ranch buried in snow right up to the fence posts. The men got to digging paths out to the barn, over to the bunkhouse, and to the animals that had bunched together to stay warm. 3 calves did not make it. 2 of the horses had come down with a bad cough. The chicken coop had caved in from the weight of the ice, but all the men were alive. The supplies were untouched, and Clara's kitchen was warm as could be. She cooked non-stop in those first few days after the storm. She made hot food to fight the biting cold, sweet things to lift everybody's spirits, and heavy meals to build back their strength. The cowboys ate like they had been starving for a decade instead of a few days. Frank Delaney was the last man to come back to the table. He walked in slow, his arm still in a sling, and his ribs taped up tight, but he was moving under his own power. The men all went silent when he walked in. Frank stopped right in front of Clara. "I owe you an apology," he announced, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You already apologized." "I did when I was half dead and burning with fever. I am doing it again now with a clear head." He took off his hat. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about what you could do out here. I was dead wrong for how I treated you, and I am sorry." Clara set her serving spoon down on the platter. "I accept your apology. It was as simple as that. So what is it you want, Frank? My blood? I want you to know I mean it. I want you to know that if any man on this ranch ever shows you disrespect from this day on, he will have to answer to me." The other cowboy shifted his weight and nodded, showing he agreed. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. "I surely appreciate that. You do a whole lot more than just cook, ma'am. You are the glue that holds us all together, and that is worth more than all the gold in the world." He took a seat, and everyone went back to their meal. But something in the air had changed. Something deep down. Later that night, Charlie Moss found Clara sitting on the porch watching the stars peek out from behind the clouds. "You handled that situation with Frank real good," he said, lighting his pipe. "I did not do anything. You forgave him. That is not nothing." Charlie blew a puff of smoke into the chilly air. "Do you know why he was so fired up when you first came here? Was it fear? Miguel told me." "Fear? Well, yeah, but it was something more than that. Frank lost his wife the very same year Ethan lost his. The situations were different. Frank's wife ran off with a cattle buyer, but a loss is a loss all the same. When you showed up, cooking just like Sarah Calloway used to, bringing some life back to this old place. He let his voice trail off. It just reminded him of everything he had lost, everything he knew he would never get back. Clara let that sink in. I had no idea. How could you have? Frank does not talk about it. None of us do. But this ranch is not just dying because of money troubles, Clara. It is dying because every soul here is grieving for something. Ethan's wife, Frank's marriage, Tommy's daddy who drank himself into an early grave, Miguel's family way back in Mexico he cannot afford to go see, Pete's dreams of ever owning his own piece of land. Charlie looked straight at her. Even you are grieving something too, are you not? Clara's hands squeezed the porch railing tight. What on earth makes you say something like that? Because folks who run from one place to the next are usually running from something they just cannot bring themselves to face. I am not running. Are you not? Clara did not give him an answer. Charlie tapped his pipe against the rail, knocking the ash out. Whatever it is you are running from, it followed you all the way out here. Sooner or later, you are going to have to turn around and look it in the eye. The only question is whether you will do it by yourself or with people who have grown to care about you. He left her there on the porch, alone with the stars and the hard truth. The next morning, Ethan found her in the pantry, rearranging things. Do you need something? She asked without even turning around. I need to talk to you about money. That sure got her attention. She turned to face him, her hands white with flour. What about it? The ranch finances. You have a right to know exactly where we stand. I am just the cook. You are a whole lot more than that, and we both know it. Ethan pulled a thick ledger out from inside his coat. This ranch is about 3 months away from bankruptcy. Maybe 4 if we can stretch every penny. The bank wants us to pay up on a loan my father took out right before he passed away. I have been keeping up with the interest payments, but now they want the whole principal. $15,000 by springtime, or they take the land. Clara felt her stomach drop to the floor. 15,000. I have got about $3,000 saved up. The cattle will not bring in near enough. The cost of feed is eating us alive, and now with all the damage from the storm. He closed the ledger. I am telling you this because if you are planning on staying, you ought to know what you are staying for. This whole operation might be a sinking ship. Why not just sell? To who? The ranch next door wants our land, but they will give me a lowball offer. It would not be enough to even clear the debt. I would lose everything and still wind up owing money. Ethan's jaw was tight. And I just cannot do that to the men. Some of them have been right here for 20 years. This is their home too. What is your plan? I do not have one yet, but I am working on it. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. Let me help you. You are already helping. You are feeding us. I mean with the finances. I am good with numbers. I used to keep the books for a logging camp up in Oregon. Let me take a look at that ledger. See if there is anything you might be missing. Ethan paused for a moment. You do not have to do that. I know I do not have to. I want to. She held out her hand. Let me help, Ethan. He handed the ledger over to her. Clara spent the next 2 full days digging through 3 years of the ranch's finances, and what she discovered made her feel sick to her stomach. You have been overpaying for feed, she told Ethan on the 3rd morning. This supplier is charging you double what you ought to be paying. That is the only supplier within 50 miles. No, it is not. There is one over in Abilene that will deliver for half the price. I found their advertisement in an old newspaper that was sitting in the pantry. Ethan just stared at the piece of paper. How in the world did I miss this? Because you were drowning. It is hard to see a solution when you can barely keep your head above water. Clara pointed to another line in the book. And right here, you are paying taxes on land you do not even own anymore. This piece of property was sold 4 years ago, according to the deed records, but you are still getting billed for it. That is fraud by the county. That is money you can get back, maybe $500. They worked all afternoon, finding one mistake after another, overpayments, and opportunities that were missed. By the time evening rolled around, Clara had found $1,200 in funds they could get back and figured out ways to cut their monthly costs by 30%. "This does not solve everything," she said, her voice rough from being so tired. "But it buys us some time." Ethan looked at her like she had just performed some kind of miracle. "Where did you learn how to do all this?" "My father was an accountant before he drank himself to death. He taught me about numbers before he even taught me my letters." Clara closed the ledger. "Numbers do not lie, Ethan. People do, but numbers always tell the truth." "What else did he teach you?" "That men will take advantage of you if you let them. That trust has to be earned. It is not just given away. That the only person you can truly count on is yourself." She paused for a second. He was wrong about that last part, wasn't he? "It turns out you can count on cowboys who put their money on you and stubborn ranchers who just about die hauling flour your way." Ethan reached his hand across the table and took hers. Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. "Thank you," he said, plain and simple. "For what?" "For seeing things I couldn't. For caring about a place that isn't even yours. For staying put when you could have lit out." His thumb traced a line over her knuckles. "For making me remember what it feels like to have hope." Clara pulled her hand away, her heart hammering in her chest. "Ethan, I know you're not looking for this. I am not either. But it is happening anyway." "Nothing is happening, is it?" He stood up. "I think about you when I'm out riding the fence line. I wonder what you are cooking for supper. I listen for the sound of your voice. I have not felt that in 3 years, Clara. I have not wanted to feel it. But here we are." "Here we are," she repeated, with nothing else to say. "I'm not asking for a thing, not expecting a thing. I just wanted you to know." He started for the door, but then he stopped. "And Clara, whatever you are running from, Charlie is right. Sooner or later you got to turn and face it. When that time comes, you do not have to face it by yourself." He left, and Clara just sat there in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by account books and hard truths. She had come to Red Hollow to settle a debt. But somewhere down the line, she had started building something new, something that scared her more than going broke or getting caught in a blizzard or dealing with angry cowboys. Something that felt an awful lot like a home. The next Sunday, Clara woke up and found the kitchen empty and the whole house quiet. She threw on her clothes, all confused, and stepped outside to find all 16 cowboys gathered near the old chapel up on the hill. Ethan was standing out front, holding his hat. Clara walked toward them slow-like. "What is going on?" she asked Tommy. "The boss called a meeting, said it was important." Ethan waited for Clara to get there before he started talking. "3 years ago, I lost my wife in that house down yonder. I lost my faith right here in this chapel. I lost my will to fight for anything more than just surviving." His voice echoed over the snow. "This ranch has been dying a slow death ever since. Not because of money, though that is a part of it, but because I gave up. I stopped leading. I stopped caring about anything except just getting through one day to the next." The men shifted their feet, uncomfortable with this much honesty. Then a woman showed up with nothing but a carpet bag and a kind of determination I did not understand. She cooked one single meal, and everything changed. Not the ranch, but us. We changed. We started laughing again, eating our meals together, caring about more than just the work. Ethan looked right at Clara. She saved Frank's life, and she saved mine. She saved this ranch from going under by finding money I did not even know we had. And she did all of it while asking for nothing in return but a chance to pay a debt that was already paid. Clara felt hot tears starting to burn her eyes. "So this is what I am proposing," Ethan went on. "We stop dying. We start fighting. We fix the money problems, we fix the fences, we fix the broken parts of ourselves that we have been ignoring, and we do it all together, as a ranch that is worth saving." "How?" Frank called out. "The bank still wants $15,000 by spring. We will figure it out. But we will do it as a team. No more one man trying to carry all the weight. No more giving up." Ethan's voice grew stronger. "Red Hollow Ranch was built by my grandfather with nothing more than some cattle and a whole lot of hope. My father kept it going through drought and the Great Depression, and I will be damned if I am going to be the Calloway who lets it die." The men erupted in agreement, yelling and clapping and promising their support. Clara just stood off to the side, watching, feeling something break and then heal inside of her all at the same time. Ethan found her after the meeting broke up. "I did not mean to put you on the spot like that," he said. "You did not? It sure felt like you did." Clara turned to face him squarely. "You want to know what I'm running from? Only if you want to tell me. I had a daughter." The words just tumbled out before she could stop them. "She died when she was only 3 years old. A fever, just like your wife had. I could not save her. I could not do anything but just sit there and watch her fade away." Clara's voice broke. "After that, I could not stay in one place. I could not build anything because everything I ever built just fell apart. Everyone I ever loved died, so I just kept moving, kept cooking, kept paying off debts that did not need paying because it was a whole lot easier than admitting I was just running from my own grief." Ethan did not say a word. He did not try to comfort her with a bunch of empty words. He pulled her into a hug and just let her cry on his chest until there were no tears left. "I am sorry," she finally managed to whisper. "Do not be sorry for grieving. I am sorry for lying, for making believe I was only here to pay off what I owed, when the truth is I was here because I had nowhere else on earth to go. You are here now. That is all that matters." Clara leaned back and wiped at her eyes. "I do not know how to stay, Ethan. I do not know how to build something and trust it is not going to crumble. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out together. What if I fail? What if I cannot save this ranch? You already saved it. Now we just got to work at keeping it alive." Clara looked up at the little chapel, then at the ranch spread out below and at the men working off in the distance. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I will stay. Not for a week and not for a debt, but because I want to." She looked him right in the eye. "Because maybe it is about time I stopped running." Ethan smiled. Ethan. A real smile. It was the first honest-to-goodness smile she had ever seen on him. "Then let us get to work." They walked back down that hill side by side. Two people carrying way too much grief, learning how to carry something a whole lot lighter. Hope. The first real test showed up 2 weeks later when the bank sent a man out. His name was Gerald Pritchard, and he rolled up in a buggy that was way too clean for a ranch road, wearing a suit that was too fancy for an honest day's work. Clara watched from the kitchen window as Ethan walked out to greet him, his shoulders set firm and his jaw tight. "This is not going to be good," Charlie grumbled next to her. "How do you know?" "'Cause banks do not send fellas in fancy suits to bring you good news." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went for the door. "Where are you going?" Charlie called out. "To hear what he has got to say. This business concerns every last one of us." She got to the porch just as Pritchard was taking papers out of his briefcase. "Mr. Calloway, I am afraid the bank's position has not changed. We require payment in full by March 15th, or we will have to begin foreclosure proceedings." "That is 4 months from now," Ethan said. "I told your boss I am working on it." "Working on it is not the payment plan." Pritchard glanced over at Clara, then looked back at Ethan. "I see you have hired more help. That is a curious choice for a ranch that is claiming to be in financial trouble. She is not more help. She is—" "I am an investment," Clara cut in, stepping right off the porch. "Mr. Calloway brought me on to straighten out the operations and cut back on costs. We have already found $1,200 in funds we can recover and have trimmed monthly expenses by 30%. Pritchard's eyebrows shot up. "Is that a fact?" "It is a fact. And we are putting new efficiency measures in place that will raise our profit margins by the time spring gets here." Clara crossed her arms. "So unless your bank wants to foreclose on a ranch that is fixing to turn a profit, I suggest you give us the time we are asking for." Pritchard looked her up and down. "And who might you be?" "Someone who knows that numbers do not lie, but banks sure do." Clara held his stare. "Your bank has been over-charing Mr. Calloway on his interest for 3 years now. We have the papers to prove it. We also have proof of some mighty suspicious tax assessments. So this is what is going to happen. You are going to take our payment plan back to your boss, and you are going to tell him to accept it, because if you do not, we will be filing complaints with the State Banking Commission about your predatory lending practices. The color drained right out of Pritchard's face. That is a very serious accusation. This is a very serious situation. Clara took a step closer. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for fair treatment. Can you provide that? Or should I start writing some letters to the folks in Austin? Pritchard snapped his briefcase shut with a sharp click. I will relay your proposal to my superiors. You do that. And, Mr. Pritchard. Clara gave him a smile that had no warmth in it at all. Next time you pay a visit, come hungry. I will make sure you get a proper meal. It might help you remember that we are people, not just numbers in your ledger. He left in a cloud of dust and offended pride. Ethan stared at Clara in disbelief. What just happened? I called his bluff. Banks hate public scrutiny. They hate it even more than they love money. She turned and started to head back inside. He will be back with better terms within the week. How can you be so sure? Because I know men just like him. They are all bark and no bite. They prey on people who do not fight back. Clara paused at the door. But we are fighting back now. Charlie was grinning from ear to ear when she walked into the kitchen. That was really something to see. That was stupid, Clara corrected him. I just threatened a banker. He could make our lives a living hell. Or he could give us exactly what we need. Charlie's grin got even wider. Either way, watching you stand up to him like that was worth it. 3 days later, a telegram arrived. It offered new terms, a lower interest rate, a payment deadline extended all the way to June, and a formal apology for the errors in the tax assessment. Ethan read it over twice. You were right. I am usually right. People just do not ever listen. Clara took the telegram from him. But this only buys us some time. We still need to make some money. I've been thinking about that. Ethan pulled out a large map. There is a big cattle drive forming up in Wichita Falls next month. A huge outfit is heading up to the railheads in Kansas. They are paying top dollar for experienced drovers and good quality beef. How much are we talking about? Enough to make a real dent. Maybe $2,000 if we send our best stock and I ride along with them. Clara's stomach just dropped. You are going on the cattle drive? I have to. They will not pay those premium prices unless the owner is there to vouch for the cattle himself. How long will you be gone? 6 weeks, maybe 8, all depending on the weather. That is 2 whole months, I know. Ethan looked her in the eyes. But it is our best shot at seeing some real money before spring comes. Clara wanted to argue with him, to tell him it was too dangerous, that it was too long, that it was just too big of a risk. But she knew enough about ranching to know better. Sometimes you had to gamble everything you had just to save anything at all. Then we get ready, she said. What do you need? The next 3 weeks were pure chaos. Ethan and Frank picked out 40 head of their best cattle. Miguel and Pete were busy repairing saddles and all the tack. Tommy and the younger cowboys practiced their roping and branding. Clara cooked meals big enough to put some meat on the bones of men who would be living on jerky and hardtack for 2 months. She also made plans. While you are gone, I am going to reorganize the winter operations, she told Ethan one night over coffee. The cattle we are keeping here need a better feeding plan. I found a fellow who will trade us hay for beef at a fair price, and Charlie says there is a vegetable farmer over near Abilene who might want to partner with us for the spring planting. You are trying to build a farm on a cattle ranch. I am making sure we have got more than one way to make a dollar. Cattle prices go up and down. Food prices stay steady. If we can raise vegetables for the towns around here, we can bring in regular money that ain't tied to the whims of the market. Ethan just shook his head, looking amazed. Where in the world did you learn about economics? From watching good men lose everything because they banked it all on one crop, one mine, or one season of cattle? Clara poured more coffee into his cup. My father lost his fortune 3 times, all on what he called sure things. That taught me you never put all your hopes in one place. Did your father teach you that? No. Watching him fail did. The night before they left, Clara was too restless for sleep. She stood out on the porch watching the bunkhouse where Ethan and the drovers were getting their gear ready. A tightness filled her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. It might have been fear, or maybe something even worse. He'll be all right. She turned and saw Frank standing right beside her, his arm finally free of its sling. I know, Clara replied. Then why do you have the look on your face like you're about to bury someone? Because 2 months is a long stretch of time. Anything can happen. Frank lit up a cigarette. A whole lot can happen in just 2 minutes. You can't live your life afraid of what might come. That's easy for you to say. Is it? Frank let the smoke drift out. For 15 years, I was scared of my own shadow after my wife walked out. I was scared to trust anyone, scared to have any hope, scared to care about a single thing because caring just meant you were asking to get hurt. He looked straight at her. Then you came along and scared me more than ever. You want to know why? Why? Because you reminded me of everything I'd been missing. You made me remember that a life lived in fear is no life at all. Frank tapped his cigarette ash onto the ground. The boss is coming home, Clara. And when he gets back, you two are going to have to sort out what this thing that's brewing between you really is. There is no thing. You just keep on telling yourself that. He left her standing there alone with the starry sky and a truth she wasn't ready to own up to. The morning showed up way too soon. The drovers were all gathered in the yard. It was Ethan, Frank, Miguel, and 2 extra hands they'd borrowed from the ranch next door. 40 head of cattle were stirring in the holding pen, all set for the long journey north. Clara came out with coffee and hot bread, her eyes fixed on Ethan as he checked his saddle for the 3rd time. You got everything you need? She asked him. I reckon so. Your money belt? Got it. Extra socks, Clara. Laudanum in case one of us gets hurt. Yes, Mother. Ethan cracked a smile. We're going to be just fine. You'd better be. I didn't turn this whole ranch upside down just for you to get yourself killed on. A cattle drive. I wouldn't dream of it. They just stood there for a moment, neither one sure what else to say. At last, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled something out. I found this when I was going through my wife's things. I thought you might like to have it. It was a recipe card with handwriting in ink that had faded over time. Peach cobbler. It was Sarah Calloway's very own recipe. A lump formed in Clara's throat. I can't take this from you. Yes, you can. She would have wanted someone to use it, someone who cares about feeding folks the same way she did. Ethan gently pushed it into her hand. Keep the ranch humming while I'm away. Keep the men fed and their minds on their work. And Clara? Yeah? Don't you run. Promise me you won't take off. Clara looked down at the recipe card, then up at this man who had somehow become as necessary as the air she breathed, and at the ranch that no longer felt like just a job, but had started to feel like her home. I promise, she whispered. Ethan swung up onto his horse. The drovers started moving, the cattle trailed behind them, and the dust began to rise. Clara stood there in the yard and watched until they were nothing but a speck on the horizon, clutching a recipe from a woman she'd never met, and wondering when she had started to care so much that it actually hurt. Well, Charlie said from behind her, guess it's just us folks now. I guess so. You really planning on staying, Clara? Carefully folded the recipe card. I made a promise, didn't I? Making promises is the easy part. It's the keeping them that's hard. Well then, I reckon we're all about to find out what I'm made of. The first week without Ethan felt peculiar. The ranch seemed too big, too quiet, like a vital piece of it was missing. Clara poured all her energy into her work, cooking, making plans, organizing everything, and pushing the men who stayed behind to keep up the standards, even though they were short-handed. She started planting a garden right behind the cookhouse, using seeds she had ordered from a mail-order catalog. She talked Charlie into helping her build some cold frames to grow vegetables in the winter. She even struck a deal with a farmer over in Abilene to trade some of their beef for seed and equipment. The men just watched her change with a feeling that was close to awe. She's like a general, Tommy said one evening, planning out her campaigns and strategies. She's like someone who finally decided to stop running, Charlie corrected him. On the 10th day, a woman showed up. She arrived in a hired buggy, all dressed in black, with a face so stern it looked like it was carved from marble. Clara was out in her garden when Charlie hollered for her. "This here is Mrs. Victoria Ashford," he said, his voice cautious. "She's come to see you." The woman looked Clara up and down with eyes that didn't miss a single detail. "So you are the cook that has everyone talking. I am Clara Whitmore. Is there something I can help you with?" "Perhaps. I am the owner of the ranch that borders Red Hollow. 3,000 acres, twice the size of the Callaway place." Victoria's smile was all in her mouth, not her eyes. "I have come to make you an offer. I am not the owner, ma'am. Mr. Callaway is on a cattle drive. He will not be back for another 6 weeks. I am well aware of that, which is exactly why I am speaking with you." Victoria took out a folded document. "I am prepared to offer $8,000 for the Red Hollow Ranch, cash paid today." Clara felt her heart skip a beat. That is not enough to cover his debts. It is enough for him to walk away without owing a dime. The bank would take a partial payment to release its claim. Mr. Callaway could get a fresh start somewhere new. This is his home. This is a failing business that is only dragging him down further. Victoria's voice softened just a little. "I am not trying to take advantage of him, Miss Whitmore. I am offering him a way out before he loses every last thing." "And the men? What's to become of them?" "Well, I'd keep most of them on. A good ranch hand is mighty hard to find these days." Clara stared down at the paper, at the number that was supposed to represent all of Ethan's hard work. Everything his family had poured their sweat into. $8,000. It was not enough. It would never be enough. "I cannot accept this for him," Clara said, each word chosen carefully, "but I will make sure he sees your offer the moment he returns. Do not take too long. This offer is gone in 30 days. Victoria hoisted herself back into her buggy. "And, Miss Whitmore, whatever you believe you are building out here, it will not stand. This ranch is finished. You are just too stubborn to admit it." As she rode off, Clara stood there holding a piece of paper that could either save them or ruin them completely. That evening she called a meeting. All the hands that were left gathered in the dining room. There was Charlie, Tommy, Pete, and 6 others. Clara laid the situation out for them, plain and simple. The offer, the time limit, the decision they all had to make. "We could tell Ethan to sell," she told them. "Just walk away from it all. Start over somewhere new." Or, Tommy piped up, "Or what? Or we prove Victoria Ashford wrong. We turn this ranch around and make it profitable before Ethan even gets back. We can show him this place is worth fighting for." Charlie leaned back in his chair. "And just how are we supposed to do that in 6 weeks? By working harder than we have ever worked in our lives. By putting all those smart ideas we talked about into action. By getting that vegetable garden partnership up and running to bring in some cash before spring." Clara looked each man square in the eye. "We do it by deciding right here and now that Red Hollow Ranch is worth saving." "I am in," Tommy said without a second's thought. "Me too," Pete echoed. One after another, every man in the room gave their word. Charlie was the last one. "You know this is a long shot," he said. "I know. And you know Ethan might just come home and decide to sell anyway. I know that too. Then why are we fighting so hard?" Clara felt the weight of the recipe card in her pocket. She thought of the look in Ethan's eyes when he made her promise not to run away, and how this place had somehow become her home when she was not even looking. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you are scared spitless, even when the odds are stacked against you, and it would be a whole lot easier to just quit. She stood up tall. "So, we fight. And we do not stop fighting until we have won, or until there is nothing left to fight for." The room erupted with a roar of agreement, and Clara felt a spark of hope. Whitmore, a woman who had spent 10 years running from every single thing that mattered, finally planted her feet firmly on the ground and refused to move. The next 6 weeks were a pure grind. They worked from before sunrise until long after sunset and sometimes even later. They planted vegetables in the frozen dirt using some old tricks Miguel's grandmother had taught him. They built a smokehouse so they could preserve meat to sell. They managed to sign contracts with 3 different towns to deliver food on a regular basis. They even started a small dairy operation with 4 old cows that nobody thought were worth a dime. Clara cooked, she organized, she planned, and she pushed. The men complained under their breath, but they kept on working. A little bit of money started to come in, just small amounts at first, but it was steady. Victoria Ashford sent over 2 more offers, each one for a little more money. Clara threw them in the fire without even reading past the first sentence. "You're crazy," Charlie told her after she burned the 3rd one. "Probably. What happens if we fail? Then we fail while we're trying. That is a whole lot more than we were doing before." 4 weeks into their fight, disaster hit. The dairy cows got into some bad feed and 2 of them died. The vegetable patch was in danger from a surprise early frost. One of their biggest delivery deals fell through when the man they were selling to found someone cheaper. Clara stood alone in the kitchen at midnight, staring at numbers on a page that just would not add up, and she felt that old, familiar feeling telling her to run. Just pack a bag, disappear, and let someone else clean up the mess. But then she thought about her promise. She remembered the look on Ethan's face when he asked her to stay. She remembered her own daughter's grave, a place she had left behind because running away was always easier than remembering. "No," she said out loud to the quiet kitchen. "Not this time." She pulled out Sarah Calloway's old recipe card and read the faded handwriting. 3 cups of peaches, 1 cup of sugar, butter, cinnamon, love. Love. Sarah had actually written that down. Love like it was an ingredient you could measure. Clara laughed, and then she cried, and then she got right back to work. The very next day, she talked Charlie into butchering one of their older steers so they could make jerky to sell. She convinced Pete to teach her how to work leather so they could sell mended tack. She got Tommy to start breaking horses for the neighboring ranches. Diversify, adapt, and survive. By the 5th week, they had made $1,700. It was not nearly enough to save the ranch by itself, but when they added it to what Ethan would bring back from the cattle drive, maybe, just maybe. On the morning of the 6th week, Clara stood in the kitchen long before sunrise. She was rolling out biscuit dough and keeping one eye on the road. Any day now, Ethan would be back. Any day now, she would have to tell him about Victoria's offer, about the money they had managed to scrape together, about the choices that were waiting for him. Any day now, she would have to figure out what this feeling between them really was. The kitchen door creaked open. Clara turned, her hands covered in flour, her heart leaping into her throat. But it was not Ethan. It was a telegram. Charlie just stood there, his face ashen, holding the paper like it was a coiled snake. "What is it?" Clara asked, but a cold dread was already creeping over her. She already knew. "There was an accident," Charlie said, his voice cracking. "A stampede just outside of Dodge City. 3 men were hurt and 2 are dead." Clara felt like all the air had been punched out of her lungs. "Ethan." "The telegram does not say who, just that there were casualties and the cattle drive is delayed." Charlie's hand was shaking. "It says they will send more information when they have it." The ball of biscuit dough slipped from Clara's fingers and landed on the floor with a soft thud. She just stood there, frozen, as her entire world tipped on its side. And just like that, everything she had fought for was on the line. Every promise, every bit of hope, all of it depended on a telegram that said way too little. Tommy came busting through the door. "Is it true about the cattle drive?" "We don't know a thing yet," Charlie answered, but his voice didn't sound too sure of himself. Clara finally found her own voice. "Saddle a horse." "What?" "Saddle me a horse. I'm riding to Dodge City. That's 3 long days of hard riding. You'll kill yourself." "Then I guess I'll die trying," Clara said, untying her apron. "I'm not going to sit here and wonder if he's alive or dead. I am done running. This time I'm fighting." She grabbed her coat and went for the door. Behind her, Charlie called out, "What should we tell the men?" Clara stopped and turned back around. Tell them the plain truth. Tell them we don't know. And tell them we keep on working until we hear otherwise. Her voice got hard as iron. And you tell them that Red Hollow Ranch does not quit. Not for banks, not for jealous neighbors, and not for death itself. She stepped out into the cold morning air, heading for the barn, for the horse that would take her to some answers, and toward whatever was waiting for her in Dodge City. She was riding toward the truth she had run from her whole life. The truth that loving someone meant risking it all, and she was finally ready to put everything on the line. Clara rode for 3 days, only stopping to let the horse catch its breath. By the time she finally got to Dodge City, her hands were covered in blisters. Her eyes burned from the dust and a deep, gnawing fear. The stockyard looked like a whole city spread out before her, with pens full of cattle and drovers milling about everywhere. The smell of livestock and money hung heavy in the air. She slid off her horse on legs that felt like jelly and grabbed the first cowboy she laid eyes on. The stampede. Where are the men who survived? He pointed toward a building on the edge of the yards. The doctors have 'em over there, but ma'am, you don't want to go in. Clara was already running. The building was 1 part hospital and 1 part pure chaos. Injured men were laid out on cots, a doctor was barking out orders, and the smell of blood and antiseptic was overwhelming. She searched the room, her heart hammering so loud it echoed in her ears. Frank Delaney was sitting in a corner, his arm freshly bandaged, his face pale with pain. Miguel was on a cot, out cold but still breathing. But there was no Ethan. The world started to close in on Clara. "Frank, where is he?" Frank looked up, and the look on his face told her everything she needed to know even before he opened his mouth. "He's alive." The relief hit her so hard she almost fell to her knees. "But he's in a bad way, Clara. A real bad way." She found him in a back room by himself, except for a nurse who was changing the bandages on his chest. His shirt was gone. His whole chest was wrapped in white cloth that was already soaking through with red. His face was so pale he looked like he was already gone. But then she saw the slow, shallow movement of his chest. The nurse glanced up. "Are you family?" "Close enough." Clara walked over to the bedside. "What happened?" "Stampede. A lightning strike spooked him. The cattle just ran over anything in their way. He was trying to turn the herd. His horse got shot out from under him. He went down hard. Took a hoof to the ribs, probably broke a few. He got trampled pretty bad. Lost a whole lot of blood before we could get him here." "Will he live?" The nurse paused for a moment. "Maybe, if an infection doesn't take hold. If his lungs don't fill up with fluid. If he's got the strength to fight." "He's strong enough," Clara said, taking Ethan's hand in hers. It felt cold. "He's the strongest man I've ever known." The nurse gave them some privacy. Clara sat by his bed, held his hand tight, and whispered all the things she had never been brave enough to say out loud. She made promises and confessions and said prayers to a God she wasn't even sure was paying attention. The hours just drifted by. Frank came in after a while. "The drive boss says we got the cattle through, sold them for a good price. Should clear about $3,000 after we pay all the bills." "I don't care about the money." "Well, you should. It's what he nearly died for." Frank sat down with a heavy sigh. He was trying to save a kid. The youngest drover got thrown from his horse when the stampede hit. Ethan went back for him. That's why he was right in the path of the cattle. That's why he went down. Did the boy make it? Yep. Walked away with nothing but bruises. Ethan here took the hit that was meant for that kid. Frank's voice cracked. Always the hero. Always thinking about everybody else, never himself. Clara squeezed Ethan's hand. "Wake up, you stubborn fool. Wake up and tell me what happened yourself. Don't you dare make me sit here guessing." But there was nothing. Just that shallow breathing and the thick smell of blood and medicine in the air. Frank got to his feet. "I'm heading back to the ranch with Miguel tomorrow. Somebody's got to tell the men what's going on. You staying?" "For as long as it takes." What about the ranch? Charlie can handle it. The men can handle it. They've been doing just fine without me for 3 days now. Clara looked Frank straight in the eye. I'm not leaving him. What if he doesn't wake up? Then I'll be right here when he passes, but I'm betting on him waking up. Frank left, and Clara was alone again with Ethan and the quiet. She talked to him all through the night. She told him about the ranch, about the money they had made, about Victoria Ashford's offers. She told him about her garden and the dairy and the deal she had made. She told him how loyal the men were, about Tommy's little bet, about Charlie's good sense. She told him about her daughter, about the guilt she had carried for 10 years, about how she'd blamed herself for not being able to save her baby girl, and how that blame made her run because staying put meant facing the hard truth that some things just can't be saved, no matter how hard you fight for them. "But I am done running," she whispered to him. "Even if you don't pull through, even if I lose you too, I am staying at Red Hollow. I'm fighting for that ranch because it is worth fighting for. Because those men are worth it. Because you taught me that some things are more important than just protecting yourself from getting hurt." His hand twitched in hers. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan?" His eyes slowly opened, looking around all unfocused and confused. "Clara, I am here. You rode all the way to Dodge City. 3 days of hard riding. I about killed the horse and myself. That's a stupid thing to do." "Yeah, well, I learned from the best," she said, pressing his hand against her cheek. "How do you feel?" "Like I got run over by about 40 head of cattle." "That's because you did." Ethan tried to smile but winced from the pain. "The kid, Tommy's cousin, is he alive?" "He is, thanks to you. And the cattle sold. We cleared $3,000. That's good." "No, it is not good enough. It's not worth your life." Ethan's eyes finally focused on her face. "You've been crying." "No, I haven't. Your eyes are all red. That's just dust from the ride." "Clara?" She finally broke down. "Yes, I've been crying. I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you before I ever got the chance to tell you." She trailed off. "Tell me what?" Clara looked at this man, the one who had pulled her from a broken wagon, who had given her a chance, who had trusted her with his whole ranch, who had made her promise she wouldn't run away. This man who had almost died to save a boy he hardly knew. This stubborn, decent, impossibly good man who had somehow become the reason she finally stopped running for good. "Tell you that I love you," she said, plain and simple. "That I am so tired of pretending that I don't. That I want to stay at Red Hollow, not because I owe you a thing, but because I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." Ethan's eyes started to get watery. "You love me?" "I love you, and it scares me to death, but I am done letting fear make all my decisions for me." "I love you too. Have since the day you threatened to cut my coat off me when I was half frozen to death." Clara laughed through her tears. "That's when you knew?" "That's when I finally admitted it to myself. But I think I've been falling for you since that first night you cooked supper." He squeezed her hand. "Don't leave." "I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever." "Promise?" "I promise." They just stayed like that, holding hands, their foreheads touching, just breathing together, until the doctor came back in and kicked Clara out so Ethan could get some real rest. His recovery took 2 weeks. 2 long weeks of Clara staying in a little boarding house near the stockyards, visiting Ethan twice a day, and watching him get better, slowly and stubbornly. Miguel got better faster and was let go after a week. Frank's arm had to be reset, but it was mending just fine. The money from the cattle drive was wired to the bank back in Red Hollow. Clara sent telegrams to Charlie, giving him updates. Ethan alive, healing, Coming home soon. Charlie sent telegrams right back. Ranch is running smooth. Money's coming in steady. Victoria Ashford made another offer. The men told me to tell that woman to go to hell. Clara couldn't help but smile when she read that one. On the 15th day, the doctor finally said Ethan was good enough to travel. You take it slow, he warned. Those ribs are not all the way healed. You strain them and you'll be right back in here, or worse. You understand? Understood. I mean it, Calloway. Your woman here tells me you're a stubborn man, but even a stubborn man can die if he's being stupid. Ethan looked over at Clara. My woman? Clara felt her face get hot. I might have introduced myself that way to a few people. Good, Ethan said, standing up real careful. Because that is what you are, if you'll have me. I already told you I would. No, I mean officially. With vows and a witness and all the things that make it real. Clara's heart just about stopped. Ethan Calloway, are you asking me to marry you in a doctor's office in Dodge City? Would you rather I wait till we get home? I'd rather you not die before you get around to asking me properly. Then I will ask you properly the minute we get back to Red Hollow. But you should know, Clara Whitmore, I am going to marry you just as soon as I can stand up straight without my ribs screaming. As soon as we save that ranch. As soon as you say yes. Yes. I haven't even asked yet. You just said you were going to. So I'm saying yes now, before you get yourself trampled again and I lose my chance. Ethan pulled her into a gentle hug, being mindful of his injuries. We are getting married. We are getting married and staying at Red Hollow and staying at Red Hollow together. The journey back was a 5-day affair, mostly because Ethan's busted ribs couldn't take a fast pace. They rode in a wagon Clara rented, letting the horses amble while they talked about everything under the sun. They figured out how to combine the cattle drive profits with Clara's earnings to satisfy the bank. They made plans to get the vegetable garden bigger and better come springtime. They talked about rebuilding the ranch into something that could stand on its own 2 feet, not just relying on the price of beef. And they talked about getting hitched in the little chapel on the hill, the same one where Ethan's folks got married, and where he'd said goodbye to his first wife. It was a place where new life grew right alongside old memories. Sarah would have really taken a shine to you, Ethan said on the 3rd day. She'd have loved that you're using her recipes, looking after the men just like she did. I'm not trying to replace her, and I know you ain't either. Oh, you're Clara, and that's more than enough. When Red Hollow Ranch finally appeared late on the 5th day, Clara felt the tears coming on again. The whole place looked different. It wasn't just tidy and put together. It felt alive. Men were out working the fields. You could see smoke puffing from the cookhouse chimney. And there were new fences and repaired barns. That little garden had even somehow made it through a frost. And there, standing in the yard, was every last one of them. All 16 men, Charlie, Tommy, Pete, Miguel, Frank, even the hands they'd borrowed who decided to stick around. They let out a holler when the wagon rolled up. "The boss is home," Tommy shouted. "And he brought Clara with him," another man added. Ethan eased himself down from the wagon, wincing a little, and the men surrounded him. They were gentle, careful of his injuries, but you could tell they needed to clap him on the shoulder, just to know he was real. Clara hung back for a moment, just watching, until Charlie came over and pulled her into a big, rough hug. "You did good, girl. Real good." "We all did good," she said. "Nah, you did good. We were just following your lead." The party went on long into the night. Clara cooked, of course. She whipped up a true feast from the food she'd left and the new supplies the men had brought in. There was fried chicken, cornbread, a big pot of stew, and a cobbler made from Sarah's recipe. The men ate like they hadn't seen food in a month. Clara knew Charlie had been feeding them just fine. This wasn't about hunger. It was about being a family again, celebrating that they had made it through, and knowing they had all fought for this place and won. After the plates were cleared, Ethan got to his feet a bit unsteady and cleared his throat. "I've got a few things to say." The room got real quiet. "First off, the money from the drive, plus what Clara and all of you made while I was laid up, comes to about $5,000. Now, that ain't enough to pay the bank off for good, but it's enough to get him to the table and work out new terms. We're not home free, but we ain't sunk yet." The men nodded, understanding. "Second, Frank, Miguel, you two almost cashed in your chips for this ranch. You're both getting bonuses. It ain't much, but it's something." Frank just shook his head. "Don't need a bonus, boss. Just need to know we've got a job." "You've got a job. All of you. For as long as you want one." Ethan took a breath. "Which leads me to my third point. I'm making this ranch a partnership. Not on some fancy legal paper, but in here," he said, tapping his chest. "What we build from now on, we build together. What we earn, we share. This isn't just my ranch anymore. It's our ranch." The men just stared, mouths open. "Boss, you can't do that," Tommy finally said. "I can, and I am. This place only works if every single one of us has skin in the game, if we all fight for it. Y'all proved that to me while I was gone. So are we in this together or not?" Charlie raised his coffee cup high. "To Red Hollow. To Red Hollow!" the men all roared back. Ethan held up his hand. "Just one more thing. Clara and I are getting married." The room absolutely erupted. There was whooping and table slapping, and everyone wanted to know the details. Clara found herself passed from one hug to the next, with handshakes and congratulations that felt both overwhelming and exactly right. "So when's the wedding?" Pete hollered. "As soon as we can get the preacher out here," Ethan answered. "Or as soon as Ethan can stand up without toppling over," Clara added with a smile. "As soon as Clara stops being so darn stubborn about letting me stand on my own 2 feet. So, never then." The whole room filled with the kind of laughter that felt like music. Later that night, after the men had headed to the bunkhouse and the kitchen was spotless, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch just looking at the stars. "You really want to marry me?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "More than I've wanted anything in a long, long time. Even though I'm a handful, especially because you're a handful. An easy life never interested me much, and neither does an easy woman." Clara laughed. "What about the ranch? What if we pour our hearts into it and still can't save it?" "Then we'll have tried to save it together. That's a hell of a lot more than I had before you walked up my drive." Ethan took her hand in his. "But we are going to save it. I know it." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're too dadgum stubborn to let it fail. And I'm too stubborn to ever let you down." 3 weeks later, they were married in that little chapel on the hill. Charlie walked Clara down the aisle. Frank stood up as Ethan's best man. The town preacher came out to do the honors. All 16 cowboys were there, scrubbed clean and looking almost civilized. Clara wore a simple white dress she had sewn with her own 2 hands. Ethan was in his best suit, his ribs still wrapped up tight, but healing. When the preacher asked if she took this man, Clara said, "I do," without a single doubt in her voice. When he asked Ethan, his answer was just as strong and sure. "I do." They kissed while the cowboys cheered and whistled, and afterward they had a proper feast, because that's just what you did. Clara had spent 2 whole days cooking every single thing she knew how to make. The tables looked like they might collapse under all that food. The men ate until they could hardly breathe. Somebody even found a fiddle. There was dancing, and the sound of singing and laughter filled the air. A kind of joy the ranch had not known in years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan pulled Clara away from the crowd. "I am happy. I am terrified, but I am happy. Is that a good kind of terrified or a bad kind? The good kind. The kind that tells me I have finally found something I care about enough to be scared of losing." Ethan gently kissed her forehead. "You are not losing this. And you are not losing me. We are building something here that is meant to last. You promise? I promise. That first year was a hard one. They managed to pay down some of the bank loan, but they did not clear it. They turned the vegetable operation into a moneymaker, but it did not make them rich. They lost some cattle to the winter and the drought, but not enough to break their spirit. They made mistakes, they fixed them, and they learned from them. Clara cooked and managed and planned. Ethan led the men and worked beside them and trusted her. The hands stayed loyal. The ranch held on. By the second year, they were making a profit. They were not wealthy, but they were stable. The bank stopped breathing down their necks. Victoria Ashford stopped sending her offers. The cattle market started looking up. And by the third year, Clara was expecting a child. She stood in the very kitchen she had first scrubbed clean 3 years earlier, her hand resting on her swelling belly, feeling that old mix of fear and hope. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked Ethan one night. He looked at her and smiled. "But what if nothing does? What if everything goes perfectly right?" "That is not how life usually works." "No," he said, "but it is how faith works, and you are the one who taught me that." Ethan knelt down beside her chair. "You taught me that caring about something means you are risking getting hurt, that staying put means you have to face your fears, that building anything worthwhile means you have to believe it will not all come crashing down." "I am scared." "Me too. But we are scared together, and that makes all the difference." Their daughter was born in the spring, a healthy and strong little girl with her mother's grit and her father's stubborn streak. They named her Sarah Grace. Sarah for Ethan's first wife, the woman who had taught him how to love. And Grace for Clara's first daughter, the one who had taught her about loss. For the grace that had somehow brought the two of them together. Clara held her new baby in the kitchen where it all began, her heart full. She felt like a long, hard circle was finally complete. She had shown up at Red Hollow trying to pay off a debt. She had decided to stay because she made a promise. She had built a home for herself because she had found love, and now she held the very future she had been too afraid to even dream about. "Thank you," she whispered down to the tiny baby sleeping in her arms. "For what?" Ethan asked, leaning in the doorway. "For being real. For being here. For giving me a reason to keep on fighting." Ethan walked over and put his arms around both his wife and his daughter. "We all keep fighting," he said. "That's what a family does." Outside the window, the ranch was humming with the sounds of work and life. You could hear the cowboys laughing, the cattle lowing in the distance, and the chickens scratching in the yard. The garden was growing, and the future was slowly unfolding. Red Hollow Ranch had been on its last legs when Clara Whitmore arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a whole lot of resolve. It was saved by some good fried chicken, a heap of stubbornness, and a powerful love. But it was saved by more than that. It was saved by a group of people who decided some things are worth fighting for, even when you're sure to lose. Worth staying for, even when it would be easier to run, and worth building, even when you know it could all come crashing down. And as Clara stood in her kitchen, holding her daughter, surrounded by the life she had built from flour and faith, she finally understood what home really was. It wasn't some place you just stumbled upon. It was a place you had to fight for. A place you earned with sweat and tears. A place you refused to give up on, no matter how scared you got. And Red Hollow Ranch, with its new kitchen, its loyal men, its bull-headed owner, and its cook who finally learned how to stay put, was at long last, completely and without a doubt, home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.